The stars burned cold and distant in the viewport as Admiral Marcus Reed gazed out at the battlefield. Debris from destroyed ships drifted silently through space, remnants of the latest skirmish in a war that had consumed galaxies for over 3 centuries. Another tactical draw. "Admiral," reported Lieutenant Grant, his voice flat with exhaustion. "The Imperial forces have withdrawn to the Cygnus sector." Reed nodded without turning. This pattern had played out countless times during his 15 years of service. Attack, defend, retreat, regroup. An endless cycle with no victor, only an ever-growing tally of the dead. "How many ships lost?" Reed asked. 7 cruisers, 12 fighter squadrons, approximately 800 personnel. Reed finally turned to face his bridge crew. Their expressions showed the familiar mix of resignation and duty. None had known a galaxy at peace. Few believed they ever would. The massive Alliance battleship Intrepid hummed as it moved away from the battlefield. Reed had commanded her for 3 years, earning respect for keeping casualty rates lower than most. But respect didn't win wars, especially not this one. The conflict between the Galactic Alliance and the Imperial Domain had begun over territory disputes in the Orion Arm. That simple disagreement had grown into a war of ideologies, then of survival, and finally into something like a religion, an unquestioned reality that shaped all aspects of civilization across thousands of worlds. "Set course for Outpost 47, Reed ordered. "We need repairs before the next engagement." The Intrepid's engines glowed brighter as the massive vessel entered hyperspace. Reed retreated to his quarters, where maps and historical texts covered every surface. Unlike his alien colleagues, Reed studied war not as a science but as an art. His walls displayed images from ancient Earth conflicts, Romans battling Carthaginians, Napoleon's campaigns, the World Wars, and the brushfire conflicts. His comm unit beeped. "Admiral Reed, Alliance Command requests your presence at Central Hub. Priority Alpha." Reed raised an eyebrow. Priority Alpha meant the High Council itself wanted to see him. That rarely meant good news. 3 days later, Reed stood before the Alliance High Council, 12 representatives from the most powerful member species. Humans held no seat here. Earth had joined the Alliance only 80 years ago, considered newcomers by galactic standards. High Commander Thel, the tall, blue-skinned council leader, spoke first. "Admiral Reed, the Perseus sector has fallen. The 4th commander in 2 years has failed to hold the line." Reed remained silent. The Perseus sector was considered unwinnable, a grinding meat grinder that consumed ships, soldiers, and reputations. "Your unorthodox approaches have produced unusual results in the Orion conflicts," Thel continued. "The Council has decided to assign you to Perseus. A death sentence disguised as an opportunity." Reed understood this for what it was, either a chance to prove humans deserved respect, or, more likely, a convenient way to dispose of an officer whose methods made the traditional commanders uncomfortable. "When do I depart?" Reed asked simply. The council members exchanged glances, perhaps surprised by his lack of protest. "Immediately," said Thel. "The Intrepid has already received new orders. Your battle group will include the remaining Perseus fleet." Reed nodded and turned to leave. "Admiral," called Thel, causing Reed to pause. "The war has lasted for 3 centuries because both sides follow the same principles of engagement. Perhaps something different is required." Reed met the alien's 4 eyes. "Different is what humans do best, High Commander." As Reed walked through the gleaming halls of Central Hub, his mind was already working. The Perseus sector wasn't just a battlefield, it was a message. The Alliance fought as it always had because it knew nothing else. The Imperials responded in kind. But humans had spent their brief civilization finding new ways to win impossible conflicts. It was time to show the galaxy how Earth fought wars. The Perseus Command Center buzzed with nervous energy as Admiral Reed entered. Officers from 6 different species stiffened, their expressions ranging from skepticism to thinly veiled hostility. "Admiral on deck." called Commander Blake, the only other human in the room. Reed waved away the formality. At ease, we have work to do. He moved directly to the holographic display at the center of the room. It showed the Perseus sector, a sprawling region with 27 star systems, 18 of which glowed red with Imperial control. The remaining 9 flickered between blue and yellow, signifying contested Alliance territory under constant attack. "Brief me on our current forces," Reed ordered. A tall, insectoid officer stepped forward. "Colonel Rax, Tactical Division. We have 17 capital ships operational, 38 support vessels, and approximately 200 fighter squadrons." He paused. Less than half of standard deployment for a sector of this size. Reed nodded, studying the map. "And the Imperial forces?" "At least triple our numbers, sir," replied another officer, her scaled skin reflecting the hologram's light. "Their main fleet centers around the Nexus system, commanding supply lines to all their holdings." The room fell silent as Reed circled the display, ignoring the glances exchanged among his new command staff. They had all heard the rumors. This human studied outdated warfare, ignored standard doctrine, and worst of all, came from a world that had spent most of its history fighting itself rather than expanding to the stars. "You're all wondering why I'm here," Reed said suddenly, looking up from the map. "And why Central Command would send someone from Earth to handle what many consider a lost cause." No one responded, but the tension in the room confirmed his words. "Let me be clear," Reed continued. "I don't believe in lost causes. I believe in adaptation. The Alliance has fought this war the same way for 3 centuries, and for 3 centuries, we've been locked in stalemate." He tapped a control panel, and the hologram shifted to display historical Earth battle formations. "On my world, we learned something crucial about warfare. Technology and numbers matter, but they're not everything. The greatest victories in human history often came when the underdog changed the rules of engagement." Commander Blake stepped forward, displaying a series of statistics. Admiral Reed graduated top of his class in Earth's combined military academy. His thesis on psychological warfare across species barriers is now required reading there, though it was rejected by the Alliance War College. Reed smiled slightly. They found it too primitive. He pulled up the current Alliance battle doctrine, displaying it alongside several Earth historical campaigns. The Alliance fights like the ancient Romans, organized, methodical, and utterly predictable. The Imperials counter with similar tactics, just with different technology, both sides trying to hammer the other into submission with brute force. Reed zoomed in on the Nexus system. "But humans, we learned to fight differently. When Rome couldn't defeat Hannibal with superior forces, Scipio attacked Carthage instead. When Allied forces couldn't breach German lines directly, they developed blitzkrieg tactics to go around them." Colonel Rax chittered skeptically. "With respect, Admiral, those conflicts happened on a single planet. This is interstellar warfare. The scale is different," Reed acknowledged. "The principles are not. The Imperials expect us to attack along established routes with standard formations, so we won't." He turned to face his staff directly. "Starting today, we implement Operation Thunderclap. We won't engage their fleets directly. Instead, we'll target their supply chains, communication hubs, and morale." The room erupted with objections. The loudest came from Major Dorn, a veteran officer with metallic skin who had survived 12 years in Perseus. "That's not how Alliance warfare works," Dorn protested. "We don't have the resources for hit-and-run tactics across such distances." Reed's eyes narrowed. "That's exactly why we'll succeed. The Imperials won't expect it." He looked around the room. "I didn't come here to lose another battle. I came to change how this war is fought." The silence that followed was heavy with doubt, but also, just barely, with a flicker of hope. The Imperial fortress world of Talon Prime loomed in the viewport, a massive planet bristling with defense stations, surrounded by minefields and patrol fleets. For 3 decades, Alliance forces had tried and failed to capture this strategic stronghold. Reed studied the tactical display as his officers waited nervously for orders. They had spent 2 weeks hiding in the shadow of Talon's larger moon, observing Imperial patrol patterns. "They're expecting us to attack the main defense grid," Reed said, pointing to the heavily fortified northern hemisphere. "Every previous Alliance commander has tried to overwhelm it with superior firepower. And failed," added Commander Blake. "Those defenses can repel 3 times our current strength." Reed nodded, "Which is why we won't attack there at all." Confusion spread across the faces of his staff. Major Dorn, still skeptical of Reed's methods, stepped forward. "With respect, Admiral, there is no other approach. The southern hemisphere has natural plasma storms that make it impossible to—" "Impossible for conventional ships," Reed interrupted, "but not for vessels with modified shield harmonics." He pulled up schematics for the Alliance fleet. "For the past week, engineering teams have been reconfiguring our shields based on data from Earth's early ion storm research." Colonel Rax chittered in surprise. "You want us to fly through the plasma storms? No ship has ever survived that." "No ship has tried with these modifications," Reed corrected. "The storms will mask our approach and provide cover from their sensors." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. It was either brilliant or suicidal. Reed continued, "The Imperials believe their southern hemisphere is naturally protected. They've concentrated minimal defenses there. We'll exploit that blind spot." 12 hours later, the Alliance fleet dove into the churning plasma storms of Talon Prime's southern reach. Ships bucked and shuddered as energy discharges hammered against their modified shields. On the bridge of the Intrepid, emergency lights flashed as systems strained under the assault. Reed stood calmly amid the chaos, watching as the fleet pushed deeper into what had always been considered a death zone. "Shield integrity at 40%, reported Lieutenant Grant, sweat beading on his forehead. "Engineering says they can't guarantee stability beyond another 5 minutes. "We'll only need 3, Reed replied. As they emerged from the storm's edge, the Imperial planet lay exposed before them, its southern defense grid minimal, its sensors still blind to their approach. "All ships, commence attack pattern Delta," Reed ordered. "Target communication arrays and planetary defense generators only." The Alliance ships struck with surgical precision. Without warning, Talon Prime's vaunted defense system failed section by section. Imperial commanders, caught completely off guard, scrambled to respond to an attack from what they had considered an impossible direction. Within hours, the unthinkable happened. The Imperial commander on Talon Prime sent a message, requesting terms of surrender. The Alliance soldiers couldn't believe it. A fortress world that had withstood decades of assaults had fallen in less than a day. As Reed accepted the formal surrender in Talon Prime's command center, the Imperial commander studied him with a mixture of bitterness and curiosity. 300 years of warfare, the Imperial said, and no one ever tried to come through the storms. Reed shrugged. "Sometimes the most dangerous path is the safest." "This was luck," the commander insisted. "A desperate gamble." "No," Reed replied. "It was understanding that your greatest defense was also your greatest vulnerability, your certainty. You were so sure the storms were impassable that you never considered someone might find a way through." News of Talon Prime's fall spread rapidly across both Alliance and Imperial space. For the first time in generations, a major Imperial stronghold had fallen without massive casualties on both sides. In the Alliance High Command, generals studied Reed's tactics with a mixture of disbelief and grudging respect. Among the Imperial leadership, emergency councils convened to assess this new threat. On the journey back to Alliance space, Reed found Major Dorn waiting outside his quarters. "I didn't think it would work," Dorn admitted. "I was wrong." Reed nodded. "The most powerful weapon in any war isn't technology or numbers. It's perception. The Imperials perceived the storms as impenetrable, so they became so, until someone questioned that perception. "What's our next target?" Dorn asked, his former skepticism replaced with curiosity. Reed smiled. Wherever they expect us least. The central war room of the Alliance flagship Dauntless hummed with activity as officers from a dozen species gathered around the strategic display. What had once been a sea of red Imperial territory across the Perseus sector now showed large patches of blue Alliance control. Admiral Reed studied the map with quiet satisfaction. 3 months had passed since Operation Thunderclap began. 3 months of breaking every rule in the Alliance military handbook. 3 months of victories that had shocked both sides. The Imperials are reinforcing the Taurus Junction, reported Commander Blake, pointing to a cluster of enemy ships. They doubled their defensive grid. Reed nodded. As expected, they still think conventionally. The door to the war room slid open, and a delegation of Alliance High Command officers entered. Their formal uniforms gleamed with medals from centuries of warfare. At their center walked High Commander Thel, his blue skin now creased with concern. "Admiral Reed," Thel said, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. "Your methods have produced unexpected results." Reed turned to face them. "Not unexpected to me, Commander." Thel gestured to the map. 7 major systems reclaimed in 3 months. No Alliance commander has achieved such results in decades. He paused. "Other sector commanders are requesting your tactical guidelines." Reed couldn't hide his surprise. "You're implementing my strategies elsewhere." With reluctance, admitted one of the other officers, an ancient general with crystalline features. "But the evidence of success cannot be ignored. Your human approach has merit." On screen, footage played from recent battles. Alliance ships attacking from impossible angles, using asteroids and stellar radiation as cover, deploying decoys that confused Imperial targeting systems, and most shocking to traditional commanders, occasionally retreating from superior forces rather than fighting to the last ship. "The Imperials are adapting," warned Colonel Rax, who had become one of Reed's strongest supporters. "Their latest deployments show they're studying your methods." Reed smiled. "Good. That means they're scared." The room fell silent as a new alert flashed across the display. "Incoming transmission from Imperial Command. Priority 1. "Put it through," ordered Reed. The screen flickered, revealing a face that made even the veteran Alliance officers step back. Admiral Vex, the Empire's legendary strategist, responsible for some of the Alliance's worst defeats over the past century. "Admiral Reed," Vex said, her voice oddly melodic despite her fearsome reputation. Her silver eyes narrowed. "The human who thinks he understands war." Reed met her gaze calmly. "I understand enough." "You have been annoying," Vex continued. "Creative, but annoying. Your tactics lack honor." "Honor doesn't win wars," Reed replied. "Winning wins wars." Vex's expression hardened. "The Imperial domain has appointed me to eliminate your threat personally. I look forward to teaching humans their proper place in the galactic order." The transmission ended abruptly. The war room erupted in concerned voices. "This is unprecedented," said Thel. "Admiral Vex hasn't taken direct command of a battlefront in 50 years. She's never been defeated." Reed turned back to the strategic display. "There's always a first time." Later that evening, Reed sat alone in his quarters, studying everything the Alliance knew about Admiral Vex. Her tactics were brilliant but rigid, relying on overwhelming force and precise execution. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Major Dorn entered, the officer who had most strongly opposed Reed's methods at the beginning. "The new battle plans are ready, sir," he said, placing a tablet on the desk. "And the crew wanted you to know something." Reed looked up. "Yes." "The Imperials have started calling us Reed's ghosts because we strike without warning and vanish before they can respond." Dorn's metallic face couldn't smile, but his voice carried pride. "It's spreading across other Alliance fleets too. Commanders are asking their human officers for input, studying Earth's military history." Reed nodded. "Good. We need everyone thinking differently now." Why? Asked Dorn. Because Vex isn't just coming to defeat us, Reed said, looking at the star map. She's coming to destroy the idea that humans have anything to teach the older species, and she'll throw everything she has at proving it. Reed stood and activated a new simulation, which is exactly what we're counting on. The Helios Nexus burned. 7 suns connected by ancient wormhole technology, the most valuable strategic location in the Perseus sector, had become a maelstrom of fire and destruction. For 2 weeks, Admiral Vex's Imperial Armada had clashed with Reed's forces in a battle unlike any in the 3th-century war. Reed stood on the bridge of the Dauntless, his uniform wrinkled from days without rest. The viewport showed distant flashes as ships died across the battlefield. Imperial forces pushing through the Gamma Corridor, reported Commander Blake, her voice strained. We're losing the outer defense ring. Reed nodded calmly. Right on schedule. His senior officers exchanged looks. Reed had predicted Vex's movements with uncanny accuracy, positioning Alliance forces to give ground in exactly the ways the Imperial commander expected. Sir, Colonel Rax approached with a data tablet. The miners have confirmed completion on all 7 stellar targets, but losses have been severe. Reed took the tablet, reviewing the casualty figures. His expression remained unchanged, but his knuckles widened around the device. Each volunteer knew the risks, he said quietly. Their sacrifice won't be wasted. On the main display, Admiral Vex's forces executed a perfect encirclement maneuver, surrounding what appeared to be the Alliance's main fleet. She thinks she has us, Reed said, more to himself than to his crew. Vex is brilliant, but she has one critical weakness. What's that, sir? Asked Major Dorn. She believes her enemy thinks like she does. Reed turned to his communications officer. Transmit the signal. Operation Solar Trap is go. Throughout the system, hidden Alliance vessels activated. Not warships. They were too small for that. But mining vessels modified with experimental technology. Positioned near each of the 7 suns over the past month during the battle's chaos, they now executed their programming. On the Imperial flagship Dominance, Admiral Vex watched with satisfaction as her forces trapped the Alliance fleet. The human's tricks have failed him, she told her command staff. Prepare final bombardment. I want Reed alive to witness the destruction of his. Her tactical officer interrupted. Admiral, energy readings from all system stars show critical anomalies. What? Vex turned to the display as warnings flashed across it. Explain. Before anyone could answer, the nearest sun flared with impossible brightness. Across the system, all 7 stars began ejecting massive solar prominences, not toward random space, but directly at the carefully positioned Imperial fleet concentrations. Reed watched as artificial solar flares engulfed Imperial formations. The Alliance had sacrificed a third of its mining fleet to plant solar excitation devices that could temporarily direct stellar activity. It was a technique theoretical physicists had dismissed as impossible. Imperial communications are going dark, reported the sensor officer. Their shields can't handle the radiation surge. Reed nodded grimly. Begin Phase 2. Throughout the system, the remaining Alliance ships emerged from hiding places in gas giants, asteroid fields, and planetary shadows. Positions Reed had spent weeks establishing while making it appear his forces were being driven back. Sir, Commander Blake said quietly beside him, this was your plan all along, to sacrifice our frontline forces to make Vex believe she was winning. Reed's eyes remained fixed on the display. War isn't about fighting fair. It's about winning with what you have. He paused. The Empire has more ships, more technology, more resources, but they lack imagination. They don't understand sacrifice. As the Imperial fleet scrambled in disarray, caught between solar flares and the surprise Alliance attack, Reed opened a channel to all Alliance ships. All units, execute precision strikes on command vessels only. Disable, don't destroy. We want survivors. Major Dorn looked at him in surprise. Sir, Vex needs to live, Reed explained. The Empire needs to understand that they've truly lost. Not just a battle, but their certainty. Their belief in their superiority. Within hours, the unthinkable happened. Imperial ships began surrendering, something not seen in centuries of conflict. The mighty Admiral Vex, her flagship crippled and command structure in chaos, sent a single message that would echo across the galaxy. The human has broken us. For the first time in 300 years, peace suddenly seemed possible. The victory at Helios Nexus changed everything. As news spread across Alliance space, celebrations erupted on thousands of worlds. For the first time in living memory, people dared to speak of peace rather than endless war. Reed stood before the Alliance High Council, the enormous chamber packed with representatives from every member species. The mood was jubilant, but Reed noticed the tense expressions of certain military officials and corporate leaders seated in the privileged sections. Admiral Reed, High Commander Fell addressed him formally. You have accomplished what many believed impossible. The Imperial domain has requested armistice talks. Applause thundered through the chamber. Reed waited for it to subside before speaking. Thank you, Commander. But our work is far from complete. Both sides have powerful interests who prefer war to peace. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Reed had just voiced what many suspected but few dared say aloud. Later that evening, Reed met with his core staff in a secure room deep within Alliance headquarters. Commander Blake sealed the door and activated security protocols. We've intercepted concerning communications, she said, displaying encrypted messages. Several Alliance weapons manufacturers and military contractors are mobilizing political allies. They're claiming your victory was a fluke. Major Dorn nodded grimly. 3 generals have already filed formal complaints about your reckless tactics. They're demanding you be removed from command before peace negotiations begin. Reed had expected this, and the Imperial side. Colonel Rax brought up intelligence reports. Worse, hardliners are calling Admiral Vex a traitor for surrendering. They're claiming humans used forbidden technology to manipulate the stars. Which we did, Reed pointed out. Not forbidden, corrected Blake. Just creative. A lieutenant burst into the room, bypassing security. Admiral, urgent news from the outer colonies. Imperial forces have launched a major offensive against 3 Alliance worlds, including... He paused, looking directly at Reed. Including Earth. The room fell silent. Reed's expression remained unchanged, but those who knew him well saw the dangerous glint in his eyes. Earth has minimal defenses, Blake said quietly. It's not considered strategically important. Not to the Alliance, perhaps, Reed replied. But to humans, it's everything. He turned to his staff. This is a desperation move. Imperial hardliners are trying to break Alliance morale by targeting humanity's homeworld. How could they assemble an attack force so quickly after Helios? Asked Dorn. Reed studied the tactical display. They didn't. This was planned before our victory, a contingency operation. Someone on their side anticipated we might win and prepared this strike to prevent peace talks. As they strategized their response, an aide entered with a secure communication device. Admiral, it's for you. The caller wouldn't identify themselves. Reed took the device. Reed here. Admiral, came a familiar voice. It seems some of my colleagues disagree with the concept of peace. Admiral Vex, Reed replied, causing everyone in the room to freeze. I'm surprised you'd contact me directly. These are unusual times. The attack on your homeworld was launched without my authorization. I've been removed from command. Reed considered this. Why tell me? Because I recognize what you represent, human. Something neither the Empire nor the Alliance has seen in centuries. Change. Her voice hardened. The fleet heading for Earth carries experimental planet killer weapons. They intend to make an example of your world. After the call ended, Reed stood silently for several moments. When he finally looked up, His eyes held a cold determination that made even his most hardened officers uncomfortable. "Contact Alliance Command," he ordered. "Tell them I need every available ship." "They won't all come," warned Blake. "Too many powerful people want these peace talks to fail." Reed nodded. "I know, but those who do come will be enough." As they prepared to defend Earth, an assassination attempt nearly succeeded when Reed's shuttle exploded minutes after he had secretly transferred to another vessel. The message was clear. Forces on both sides were determined to keep the war going, whatever the cost. "They think killing me will stop what I started," Reed told his staff as they plotted Earth's defense. "They don't understand that it's too late. The idea has spread." Across Alliance space, ships began moving, not just official military vessels, but civilian transports, mining vessels, and mercenary crafts. Word had spread. Earth needed defenders, and humanity's allies were answering the call. Earth hung like a blue jewel against the blackness of space, seemingly peaceful despite the approaching danger. The Imperial fleet emerged from hyperspace. 50 capital ships and hundreds of support vessels, all converging on humanity's homeworld. But they weren't met with the expected light defenses. Instead, they found a waiting armada unlike any assembled in the war's history. Reed stood on the bridge of the Dauntless, now positioned at the center of a formation that included not just Alliance military vessels, but ships from independent worlds, corporate fleets, and even a handful of defected Imperial cruisers. Most surprising were the civilian vessels, thousands of them forming a protective wall around Earth. "Imperial command ship is hailing us," reported Commander Blake. Reed nodded. On screen, the face that appeared wasn't Admiral Vex, but a stern Imperial general named Draz, known for his brutal tactics. "This is General Draz of the Imperial domain. Remove your vessels or be destroyed along with this insignificant world." Reed stepped forward. "This is Admiral Reed. Your war is over, General. Look around you." The view screen shifted to show the full extent of Earth's defenders, a force that had materialized not through official channels, but through a groundswell of support from beings tired of endless war. "Impressive gathering of scrap," scoffed Draz. "But our planet killers will." "Will never fire," Reed interrupted, his voice calm. "You were so focused on building a weapon to destroy Earth that you didn't notice what we've been building." The display changed again, revealing the Imperial fleet surrounded by small, nearly invisible satellites, thousands of them, positioned throughout the area. "What is this trickery?" demanded Draz. Reed allowed himself a small smile. "Not trickery. Insurance. Those devices can neutralize any weapon system they target. We've been developing and deploying them since Helios." Draz's face contorted with rage. "You're bluffing. All vessels, prepare to fire on my mark." "Perhaps a demonstration," Reed said, nodding to Colonel Rax. Throughout the Imperial fleet, weapon systems suddenly went offline. Ship after ship reported complete failure of offensive capabilities. "You see, General," Reed continued, "I could have kept this technology secret, used it to win more battles, claim more territory. That's what you would have done." He paused. "But this war has gone on long enough." The bridge fell silent as Reed stared down his enemy. "I'm not interested in victory. I'm interested in ending this madness." 12 hours later, aboard a neutral station positioned between the fleets, Reed sat across from both Imperial and Alliance leadership. Admiral Vex had been restored to her position after General Draz's failure, and she regarded Reed with something approaching respect. "You could have destroyed our fleet," she said. "Why didn't you?" "Because dead enemies can't become allies," Reed replied simply. The peace treaty took shape over 3 days of intense negotiation. Reed surprised both sides by focusing not on territorial gains or reparations, but on cultural exchange, trade agreements, and mutual defense pacts. "You're not thinking like a military commander," observed High Commander Thel during a break. "That's precisely the point," Reed answered. "For 3 centuries, both sides thought only in terms of military strategy. No one thought about after. When the treaty was finally signed, cheers erupted across thousands of worlds. Ships that had once fired upon each other now exchanged ceremonial salutes in orbit around Earth. 5 years later, Reed stood in the new Galactic Council chambers, where representatives from both former Alliance and Imperial worlds now sat together. A monument in the center of the room depicted the historic moment when enemies became partners. Admiral Reed approached a young cadet from a former Imperial world. "They say you knew from the beginning that you would end the war, not just win battles. Is that true?" Reed shook his head. "No one can predict the future with such certainty. I just understood something both sides have forgotten. That war is a means, not an end." He gazed out at the transformed galaxy. Where shipyards had once produced weapons of destruction, they now built vessels of exploration. Where militaries had consumed resources, schools and hospitals now flourished. "Humans have a saying," Reed told the cadet. "The true victory isn't defeating your enemy, it's turning them into friends." As the sun set on the new era of peace, the plaque beneath the monument simply read, "The war raged for centuries, until a human general changed everything."